start a new section, risk management. Risk management is a very new discipline. It is really evolving even now. But you should understand that the risk management has been in practice for so many years. Like say the instruments like insurance have been there for so many years, and you can really see people selling forward contracts and all many years back. But risk management as a profession really started only quite recently. 1 minute. Praveen, can you mute the audio? Praveen and Ashwin, please mute the audio. Yeah, Ashwin, thank you. And Sean, you can also mute the audio, but I don't get any noise. But still, better you mute the audio. Sean, please mute the audio if you haven't done that. Okay. So, risk management as a profession, I mean, as a separate department in entities, is a very recent phenomenon. Probably the first bank to have a risk management department was Merrill Lynch, and they started in 1987. And now, in 1987 was the first time a bank had a risk management department. Merrill Lynch started it. Now, if you go across the world, I don't think you can find a single bank not having a risk management department. So, in 1988, the Bank for International Settlement started. I mean, their headquarters is in Basel. They had a complete risk management framework introduced as Basel I, capital adequacy framework. Not risk management framework, capital adequacy framework. That is very much connected with risk management. Capital is supposed to be the cushion for the unexpected risk. That's really a very sophisticated way of looking at risk, like expected risk and unexpected risk, all those things. Expected loss and unexpected loss, all those things. That's like the quantitative part of the risk management, right? So, 1988 Basel I capital adequacy regulations have come, and from there onwards, it is really becoming very quantitative. Like if you now talk about risk management, it's like very sophisticated statistical tools and all we use it. So we all have a feeling that it is very much oriented towards quantitative techniques. But believe it or not, the bulk of risk management is based on intuition and qualitative methods. But still, you should be aware that there are so much quantitative techniques. The modern risk management has its foundation on the Markowitz portfolio management theory. Like in 1958, portfolio selection, there was an article, it was not 58, 52. Markowitz published an article called Portfolio Selection. That is the foundation for what we see as the risk management today, like the quantitative part of it. Of course, the insurance, forward contracts, so many other items were there even much earlier to that. Okay, so now you know that there is not even a single bank not having a risk management department. So that shows like all the, I mean, started with financial institutions, but other type of entities also got dedicated risk management departments nowadays. It's really an evolving function. There are so many certifications in risk management, like financial risk management, financial risk manager. Then there is like professional what is it, PRM course, FRM course, like that. There are so many courses dedicated only for risk management. But even otherwise, also management accountants should be aware of the growing importance of risk management. That is the reason it is there in the curriculum. And the Code of Professional Ethics for Management Accountants has incorporated this uh, risk management as a necessary competence for management accountants. In 2017, when they revised the Code of Professional Ethics, IMA Code of Professional Ethics, when they revised it, under the competency standard, there is a provision that there is a clause saying that uh, the management accountant should identify and help manage risk. So it is really important. IMA has issued at least 2 or 3 SMAs on this topic. You know what is SMA? Statement on Management Accounting. Like if you really see the pronouncements of the institute, you can really see their circulars. You can really see their viewpoints there in the articles through the strategic financial magazines, all that. But when they publish something as SMA, that is the official view of the institute. There are so many SMAs on this topic, and you can really see the evolution of risk management by reading them. One of the SMAs they are citing in this study unit 12 is IMA Statement on Management Accounting, Enterprise Risk Management Frameworks, Elements, and Integration. You don't have to memorize anything. It is just an SMA. Probably I think some 30 odd pages are there if I remember correctly. Um, this was originally published in 2014, but they revised in uh, yeah, this SMA was originally published in 2014 and it was revised in 2018, right? Very slight amendments were there in that. So here you can really see that the ERM, Enterprise Risk Management. Okay, I will just read it actually. IMA Statement on Management Accounting, Enterprise Risk Management Frameworks, Elements, and Integration describe it this way, right? The treasury function focused on risk emanating from foreign currencies, interest rates, and commodities, so-called financial risk. Organizations, insurance group focused on hazard risks such as fire and accidents. Operating management looked after various operational risks, and information technology group was concerned with security and system risks. The accounting and internal audit function focused on risk caused by inadequate internal controls and trends in performance indicators. The general assumption was that the executive management had its eye on the big picture of strategic risks facing the enterprise in the short term and over the life of the strategic plan. So that means actually this was the state of risk management initially. In the previous decades, businesses addressed risk management with a fragmented approach. So this is a fragmented approach. Like uh, the insurance department will be looking at this, and the operational risk management will be looking at operational management will be looking at some kind of operational risk. The accounting department and internal audit function will be looking at the internal controls. Uh, this kind of fragmented approach is not suitable for the complex and interconnected business environment of the 21st century. So, as a response to that, the concept of enterprise risk management arose to address the current need. What is the current need? When the risk is getting managed in silos, right? When the risk is getting managed in silos, we should note down these words because these are commonly used when they used to describe this, right? So when the risk is getting managed in silos, that's not good enough in today's complex and interconnected business environment. So businesses are complex, meaning there are different functions involved. They are interconnected. So change in one department would really require change in other departments, or change in one department would really affect the functioning of other departments. So you cannot do risk management in silos. So this kind of fragmented approach, which was followed in the initial period in 1990s, all that, 1990s only they started having this risk management in the organizations. Started with financial institutions. So they had the treasury managing the treasury risk, foreign exchange management, all that. The operational groups managing the operational risk corresponding to related to their area. This kind of fragmented approach was not good enough, and then the answer to that came from enterprise risk management. So this was a fragmented approach. So that word you should not. Another word you might see for this is a stovepipe approach. Like you have a problem, and without looking into anything else, you're trying to solve that. That's a stovepipe approach. Stovepipe approach, silos, fragmented approach. These are not the solutions for risks which are there in an organization which are having interconnected functions. You need to have an enterprise wide solution to manage. That has come with ERM, enterprise risk management. So enterprise risk management approaches risk from enterprise wide perspective, right? When you talk about enterprise wide perspective, you should really see the goal of every organization. There is only one goal, which is really the single most. There is only one goal, I cannot say. The single most objective of every organization is the maximization of shareholders' wealth. Right? That's the objective of financial management. That's the objective of any management. See, like the maximization of shareholders' wealth. That's the objective. So ERM is working toward that objective, to create, to protect, and to enhance shareholders' value by managing the uncertainties that could either negatively or positively influence achievement of the organization's objective. So they are actually giving the goal of risk management and in fact defining what is risk management. The goal of risk management is the goal of the organization. The goal of the organization is to create, protect, and enhance shareholder value. But here, when you manage risk, you should achieve that objective. So that is the goal of enterprise risk management. The goal of enterprise is tuned for the risk management functions. So the goal of any organization is to create, protect, and enhance shareholder value. But enterprise risk management does that by managing the risk. Another probably uncertainties that could either negatively or positively influence achievement of the organization objectives is a good definition for risk. Uncertainties that could negatively or positively influence achievement of the organization's objectives is a very good definition for risk. So you can really remember this definition, right? It is to create, the goal of ERM is to create, protect, and enhance shareholder value by managing the risk. Right? So by managing the risk means by managing the uncertainties that could negatively or positively influence achievement of the organization's objective. So that is the risk management. But you should, I mean, here there is a very good definition of risk. That's the uncertainty that could either negatively or positively influence. So positive impact and negative impact on the achievement of or which can influence the achievement of the organizational objectives negatively or positively are risks which are to be managed. Right? That is risk management. But the objective is very clear: to create, protect, and enhance shareholders' value. But actually speaking, this sentence is taken from the 2014 edition. This was revised in 2018, I said, no? Then this word was changed. It is now stakeholder. The difference between stakeholder and shareholder, you need not worry so much about it, but then let me explain. When they, with so much deliberations, when they changed, IMA itself was changed, you should really understand it. Stakeholders is a broader terminology than shareholder, right? Stakeholder means, as an organization is concerned, actually those who are anyway affected by the organization's activities are stakeholders. Need not be the owners only. But anyway, ultimately it is shareholder, there is no doubt about that. But even then, even if you understand shareholder as the owner, even there that terminology has got a problem, shareholder, because the limited liability companies and shareholding companies are only one type of industry. You don't call like in other industries a shareholder, right? Even a partner, I don't think people call a partner as shareholder. So that terminology is nowadays limited to limited life, shareholding companies. So it is better to use the word stakeholder, and that is the reason this is now amended to stakeholder. But somehow in the claim study unit, they have reproduced it from the original SME. Okay, I think now you have a good background about the enterprise risk management. That is an evolution of the risk management, the stovepipe approach, meaning managing the risk in silos. Having the stovepipe approach is not suitable for the interconnected businesses where activities or the development in one department would affect the other department. You need the coordination of all the departments, so you cannot have this risk management in silos. So you need an ERM approach towards that, right? That ERM we are talking about. But I told you, risk is not something which is new actually. Like even the costing we study, the cost accounting we study, business risk, right? There are many types of risk, and in the cost accounting we study business risk. You remember that in the marginal costing and all, the break-even point, business risk, all those things we study, right? What is business risk? It's the risk that the company will have lower than anticipated profits or will incur a loss. That is the business risk. You remember business risk when you study in costing. That is the risk that the company will run into loss or will not achieve the anticipated profit, right? That is business risk. This is not the modern risk management we are talking about, but you are familiar with this terminology, right? Business risk. And you remember, and most of you have attended my class in the ratio analysis. I think everybody except Praveen, right? There I was talking to you about business risk split into, the total leverage is a measure of, degree of total leverage is a measure of the business risk. That is split into operating risk and financial risk. This is there actually, like not much earlier. Like this kind of view of business risk is there in the costing textbook. So this is the operating risk. What is operating risk? The risk that the businesses would not generate sufficient contribution to cover the fixed cost. That is the operating risk, right? The variability in the contribution can really affect its ability to absorb the fixed cost. So the entities having fixed cost has got a high amount of operating risk. So they need to generate that much contribution. So if you are sure of that kind of a demand, then only you should go for automations and high amount of fixed costs. So the risk that the entity will not have sufficient demand to cover their fixed costs, sufficient demand to generate contribution to cover their fixed costs. That is the operating risk. And what is financial risk? The risk that the entity would not generate sufficient EBIT to cover their fixed finance charges. That is financial risk, right? So degree of financial risk, you know a formula to measure that. Degree of operating leverage, you have a formula to manage that. That all those things I'm not getting into that. But business risk is the risk that the businesses would not generate sufficient profits, the anticipated profit, the risk that they may not be able to achieve the expected profit or would incur a loss. That is the business risk. And operating risk is the risk that the businesses would fail to generate sufficient contribution to cover their fixed costs, right? So they would have an operating loss. Here, financial risk is that they will not be able to cover their fixed finance charges, and they will be ultimately having a net loss, right, available to their owners, common shareholders. That is the financial risk. So you are familiar with that. You have heard of that. Now let us go into the other types of, like when you talk about risk management, this is not the only thing actually. Of course, this is another way of looking at risk. This is a costing way of looking at risk, like cost accounting way of looking at risk. So now we are going to learn some other terminology here, the other types of risk. This is also one type of risk. But anyway, don't just get carried away by these 5 types of risk. Risk is not classified into 5 types and all. They are A, B, C, D, E. They are talking about 5 types of risk. These are 5 main types of risk. Also, you could say, but then some other author would have classified it differently. So it is like they are introducing you 5 types, 5 categories of risk. One I have already explained, right? So don't think that risks are classified into 5 types. No, there are various types of risk. We will have to understand what they are, all that. So let me introduce the term what they are giving. Hazard risk. Like the entities will face so many hazards, right? These are events which is really bringing some kind of misfortune to the organization. Like if there is a fire or a natural disaster, there is death of a key person. These are all hazards. Sabotage, impairment of physical assets, terrorism. These are some events which can affect the organizations adversely. They are hazards, right? And they are also called insurable risks because when it comes, the impact is so high, but it rarely, it's not so frequently happening. So these are normally insurable risks. You can go for fire insurance. You can have an insurance to cover the other death of key persons, like that. Normally, these are insurable risks. So, what are the hazardous examples? Fire, natural disasters. Fire could be natural disaster also, right? One form of natural disaster also. Fire could be for anything as such. Okay, you can have fire. People as a means of terrorism or sabotage, they can really fire the resources of the entity, the company premises, all that. So fire, terrorism, natural disasters, death of key persons, these are all specific risks affecting the organization which are insurable. Such risks are called hazard risk. You're clear about that. So many insurance policies are there to cover this thing. Some are specializing in some type of insurance like that. You can really go for this thing covering the hazard risk. Another type of risk is what we call it as financial risk. That is the risk which we are talking about when we go for courses like FRM, Financial Risk Management, PRM, Professional Risk Management course. Also. That is the subject we should really learn when we specialize in risk management. So financial risk. This financial risk is different from the component of business risk. There, that financial risk is the inadequacy of a bit to cover the fixed charge, fixed finance charge. But this financial risk is a very say specialized discipline within the risk management. Financial risk. You have to manage financial risk, especially in financial institutions. That is the reason the risk management was evolved as a profession in the financial institutions initially. Now all types of entities need to have financial, risk management, especially financial risk management also, along with other risk management. So when you see a financial institution, the financial risk uh, is one main important category. Another main important category in institutions is operational risk. Under the financial risk, one main category is the credit risk. What is credit risk? Credit risk is the risk of default. When you lend money, the people may be unwilling or incapable of giving you back the money. That is the credit risk. When you sell, also this can happen. Not only that, when you lend, actually, the credit, only you can give. You can sell. You should sell to customers who are credit worthy. Credit worthy means they are willing and they are capable of return. Giving the money. If you give them, extend credit to them, like give them a period to pay the money, they should be. If you are not selling, you will use that 10% or 20% margin. But if you sell and do not collect, it is not this 10%, it is 110% the loss. So it is very important in any business organization, not only in banks where you are lending money. The credit risk is the risk of default. The people will not be able to give you, or they will not be willing to give you the money they owe to your organization. That is credit risk. You should have some way, but now this credit risk is also like very sophisticated quantitative techniques are involved there. Actually, you have tools like, duration, convexity, all those things, like very sophisticated quantitative techniques in any branch of risk management. It is there, so I'm not going to mention them because that's not there in the curriculum. So credit risk is is a very important aspect. Uh, like you can see that it's one of the main components of financial risk. Credit risk, the risk of default. Another broad area which is coming under financial risk is market risk. So actually, credit risk and market risk are the components of financial risk, but now we include liquidity risk also as a special category. See, this kind of classifications are getting shaped by the Basel norms. Basel is the headquarters for the Bank for International Settlements and Dispute. I told you. They come up with the capital adequacy regulations. That's mostly about risk management. They have deliberations there, how to manage the risk in financial institutions. That's the main topic there. So there, earlier they were talking about credit risk and market risk, and liquidity risk was coming under the market risk. But now, liquidity risk is the main type of risk which may or may not relate to the market. Liquidity, see what is liquidity risk? You may not be able to meet your obligations when they become due. That is the liquidity risk. So you in banks and all is really important actually. Like there are some expected withdrawals today, so you need to have sufficient funds to satisfy those needs. There may be some instruments getting due in a week's time, so you need to have in 2 days time, so you need to have that. So in a week's time you need to have the funds ready for that. Then in a month's time, then 2 months time, 3 months time, 6 months time, like that. You have maturity buckets of the liabilities you have to satisfy, and you need to ensure that the short term liquidity is sufficient to meet those liabilities. So it is essentially a bucketing, like based on the maturity pattern, the remaining maturity pattern. So it is a maturity ladder approach they follow for liquidity management. That is like, of course, any exposure to the market will give you that, but that is more to do with the structuring of the maturity of your assets and liabilities. So that is now viewed as a separate risk facing the organization, financial institutions. So credit risk, market risk, and liquidity risk. These are the three types of financial risk you can really see in financial institutions. When it comes to market risk, again, you have other specializations. Like market risk will come like interest rate risk. That is, your exposures will have an interest rate risk. Sean, can you mute the audio? Sean and Nevin also. Nevin, can you mute the audio? So it is not Nevin. I don't know. Sean, can you mute the audio? I don't know. Sean, I revoked your access, but then even then that noise is coming. I don't know. Anyway, now it's fine. Now it's fine. Sorry for the disturbance. So market risk comprises of interest rate risk. There is that. When there is a change in the market interest rates, there may be a mismatch between the interest you are receiving from your customers and the interest you are paying to your depositors. That is the interest rate risk, which is a very significant component in the financial institutions, because they take deposits and then they lend that money to customers as loans, right? So interest rate risk is very important there as a market risk. That's not within, that's there in the market. Like it really depends on the market factors like the demand and supply of money, right? So interest rate risk is one component of market risk. Then foreign exchange risk, right? The exchange rate might fluctuate. So if you have receivable in a foreign currency, or a payable in a foreign currency, you can be adversely affected, or uh, you can be affected by the changes in the exchange rate. That is what is called foreign exchange risk, right? Then another type of market risk is commodity risk. The commodity prices fluctuate. Based on that, you can have the valuations affected or the profitability affected. So that is interest rate risk is really important. You should really see that all the facilities are actually nowadays, all resources are getting valued at the present value of the expected cash flows. That's the modern approach to any asset. Like any asset is nothing but the present value of a string of cash flows. So when the interest rate go up, this value come down. As the interest rate increase, the present value of all the future, as the interest rate go up, the present value of all these future cash flows will come down. The value of the assets will come down. Similarly, the long-term liabilities also are to be valued at the present value, the cash flows expected on settlement of those liabilities. So market risk is a very significant component in every organization. So the market risk comprises of interest rate risk, foreign exchange risk, and commodity risk. So these are the three types of risk when we talk about financial risk. This is very much visible in a financial institution, but financial risk is there in all the organization, right? So you understood this terminology. So are you clear about financial risk? Financial risk. Financial risk encompass interest rate risk, exchange rate risk, commodity risk, credit risk, liquidity risk, and market risk. I mean, they are just mixing up, but I told you like the way people look at this risk, financial risk, you can really see that it comprises of credit risk, market risk, and liquidity risk. Market risk comprises of interest rate risk, foreign exchange risk, and commodity risk. You get that picture? How the this is the way the financial risk management department is organized in most of the banks and other financial institutions. Okay. So now I told you financial institutions, they have financial risk management, which is having this. Another major area of risk management is operational risk. And then one more department in most of the banks they have is strategic risk. So let me now, so I have explained you the businesses, which is the cost accounting classification, which you are familiar with in your BCom. Then I have explained you what is hazard risk, which is insurable risk. Then I had explained you financial risk, which encompasses credit risk, market risk, and liquidity risk. Now I will explain you what is operational risk. You should really remember the definition of operational risk, because it is not operating risk which you just now heard. It is operational risk. It is the risk of loss arising from inadequate or failed systems, people, or processes. Can you just repeat that sentence? The risk of loss arising from or emanating from inadequate or failed systems, people, and processes. So that is the definition for operational risk. Do they have it here? No, they don't. Yeah, they have. Operational risks are related to enterprise ongoing everyday operations. Operational risk is the risk of loss from inadequate or failed internal processes, people, and systems. This is a good definition. This is the definition of operational risk. Operational risk is the risk of loss arising from inadequate or failed processes, people, or systems, or systems. That is the operational risk. These failures can relate to human resources, inadequate hiring and training practices, business processes, poor internal controls. Then it can relate to technology failures, product failures. When there is a product failure, customer ill will can result. Then they can sue you when there is a product failure. So these are all coming under operational risk, right? Operational safety and health incidents also can come under operational risk. Environmental damage and business continuity is another big area in the business continuity is another big area in operational risk. What is business continuity? When you are having power outages, or that's a minor thing actually. When there is a power outage, if that is really having so much impact on that, you need to have generators, UPS. Sometimes UPS may be good enough, sometimes generator may be good enough, sometimes generator also may not be good enough, because even a second interruption in the power can cause lives. In that case, actually, automatically it should be switched without even a split second delay. So that kind of issues are also there actually. So power outage. Sometimes there may be a natural disaster that the whole premises are lost, right? Destructed. So you need to have some kind of risk management to ensure that this facility is regained, and you need to really have some kind of processes in place, actually the steps, procedures in place to continue during the period of disruption. So business continuity and disaster recovery, all those things are a part of the operational risk management, because we are talking about risk of loss arising from inadequate or failed internal processes, people, or systems. And when it comes to operational risk, legal risk is a part of it. What is legal risk? Like you are not complying with the legal provisions concerning the functioning of your department, and then that may attract penalties and other legal provisions. That is the legal risk. That you may violate certain laws. That is the legal risk. Compliance risk, okay, this is also legal risk, is also there a part of the compliance risk, but compliance need not be only with the regulations. Compliance could be there with the internal business policies, internal policies. So that's a broader concept, compliance, than the legal risk. Compliance with the regulations, laws and regulations will really result in some kind of legal risk. Compliance with other policies and the compliance with the best practices also can really cause damages to the organization, right? So that is operational risk. So operational risk can be managed with adequate internal control, business process re-engineering, business continuity planning. So it's a very broad area in many organizations. So we are now clear of hazard risk. They are insurable risks. Examples: fire, natural disasters, death of key persons. Then we have gone through business risk. That is a costing cost accounting way of looking at risk. That is the risk that the company will have lower than anticipated profits or will incur a loss. Then we have gone through financial risk and operational risk, which are the two main ingredients of the risk in financial institutions. Then strategic risk. The strategic risk is actually a very broad, high-level risk. Say global economic risk, regulatory risk. You know, like what is legal risk? Legal risk is the risk that you do not comply with the laws and regulations. But what is regulatory risk? That is the risk that the law itself can change. Like today you have a regulation concerning that aspect, but that can change, that can adversely or positively affect you. So that is regulatory risk, right? And that the while legal risk is coming under compliance risk, regulatory risk is coming under strategic risk, right? Political risk. The governments can change and the policies of the government can change. That can really affect your business. When there is a political risk, you can have expropriation risk. What is expropriation risk? If this government is overturned by another socialist government, probably they may nationalize everything, all the private businesses, right? That is expropriation risk. Then probably expatriation risk also can be there, like all the foreign entities, like all global names have to be out. So this kind of risk are coming under strategic risk. The risk related to global market conditions, political risk, regulatory risk, global economic risk, and then reputation risk, leadership risk. brand risk, and changing customer needs, like changing customer perceptions. All those things are coming under strategic risk. See, this technology might get outdated, so the customer's tastes and preferences can change. So those are better classified under strategic risk. So you should really have an eye whether this product is really going to face an obsolescence in the next 5 years. Means you need to really be prepared for it. So these are the types of risk you should be familiar with. Then, as I told you, risk is uncertainty. Uncertainty means actually that can be measured by understanding the variability. The more variability, the more uncertainty. Right? The more variability, the more uncertainty. The more uncertainty, the more variability, the more risky. Right? So risk is primarily measured through standard deviation, the variability. You have an expected value for anything. That is what is called mathematical expectation or anything. That is a probability weighted risk. And then, probability weighted value of that. And then how much this can, like the expectation, the actual can vary from the expectation. That is the risk. So it is a mathematical framework. Like you go for expectation, computation of expected value, and what is the standard deviation from that expected value. So there are so many sophisticated statistical techniques, quantitative techniques to really measure this variability and then quantify this. Right? So in all these things, you should understand that the more the variability, the more the risk. Right? And if you really quantify that, you can really see that the bigger the monetary exposure you have, the more risk you have. The farther you go into the future, the duration, right? The more uncertain you are, right? And what do you say, like the more fluctuations, like certain things by nature will be fluctuating so much actually. So the more volatility you have, the more uncertain you will be, right? Volatility means like, okay, today's value is this much, tomorrow's value. If you take the valuation of a particular asset for the last 365 days or 730 days, whatever, if the fluctuation in the value, that is what is called volatility, the higher the fluctuation in that value, the more uncertain and the more risky that asset is. Like that you need to be. Then when you see these valuations and all, like the higher the interest rate, the room for fluctuation in the interest rate is higher, right? The higher the interest rate, the higher would be the impact on the valuation. You know what is valuation? It is nothing but the present value of the expected future cash flows. So you can really see time, the duration. Time is not just the time, the amount weighted time. That is what is called duration. That's a quantitative technical terminology. Duration. Then okay, before the duration, I should say how much is the exposure, expected exposure, duration, the volatility. Then what else? Interest rate. These are all elements you should really see when you quantify the risk. The elements where I have written these, like these are all like directly affecting the risk. The higher the interest rate, the higher the risk. Higher the volatility, higher the risk. Longer the duration, higher the risk. The bigger the exposure, higher the risk. So in any option pricing models and all these concepts will come, but luckily you are not learning so much into these quantitative techniques. You can just forget about it. I think in the other study units you will be learning about some quantitative techniques. You have portfolio risk management. You have value at risk models, but not sophisticated mathematical computations. One way you are very lucky that in the CMA examination you are allowed to take only a business calculator. When it comes to all these things, the high sophisticated statistical techniques, this calculator is not good enough. So you are lucky that even a pi, e, all those things are fundamental to all this interest rate risk, all those things when it comes. So you will not be asked a single question on that. That is not going to be there in the curriculum for CMA. So you can just forget about the quantitative techniques, the sophistications involved in that, the mathematical computations involved in that. But you should appreciate that this quantitative techniques is really important when it comes to risk management. But at the same time, there is a good amount of intuition, there is a good amount of experience and gut feel involved in this area. That you will appreciate when I explain you the key steps in the risk management process. It is essentially a qualitative evaluation, although there are quantitative techniques involved. So let me explain you the steps in the risk management process. Certain businesses are more risky than others, right? If you go into some businesses, you have to face all types of risks. So your choice of which business to be in, there itself the risk management starts, right? That's the starting point, I can say. And when you are into a business, you have various objectives. So you start a business, that itself is an objective. So that also is not an exception from that terminology when I say. But then you can see in the choice of that business, there a big type of risk is involved. And when you have fixed your mind on a business, you will be setting your objectives. So you will have unforeseen risk to the achievement of those objectives. They are called risk. So risk is there in the choice of the business, and then risk is there in the achievement of the objectives of the chosen business. And risk is there like when you do some change in one, like some steps in achievement of one objective, then it may have implications in the other objective. So there is interconnectedness. So all these are aspects of risk management, right? So unless you have an objective, there is no risk, right? People, when you have an examination tomorrow, there is a risk that you may not be able to get up in the morning. If you don't have an examination, you have no plan to get up, what is the big deal? When you get up, you get up. Then you are not worried about whether the alarm work or alarm doesn't work. So you should have objectives, and any unforeseen obstacles to the achievement of your objectives is considered risk. So first step in risk management is to identify a